Get out of here, Mom. Far away. John's words echoed in my ears like a death sentence. He had just handed me a check for $15,000 after selling my $4 million ranch behind my back. My own son, the person I trusted most in this world, was kicking me out of my own home, as if I were an intruder. But what he didn't know was that I had known about his plans for a week, and had already taken steps that would leave him speechless. $15, I asked with a smile he mistook for resignation. Is that all I'm worth to you after 40 years of building this place? John shrugged with a coldness that pierced my heart. Mom, you're getting too old to manage a ranch this big. I sold the property for $4 million. I invested the money in a business that will double our profits, and this is your share, so you can live comfortably somewhere else. He showed me some papers with a forged signature that was supposedly mine. What John didn't know was that David had come to see me the week before, crying and trembling with rage. Mom, I heard John on the phone with the lawyer. They're planning to forge your signature and sell the ranch. He said he already has a buyer, and that you're too old and confused to notice. My younger son had risked his relationship with his brother to save me from this betrayal, and thanks to him, I had been able to prepare for this moment. For 40 years, I had built this ranch with my own 2 hands. I arrived here a young widow with 2 small children and $100 in my pocket. I worked 18-hour days. My hands became covered in callosis, my back bent under the weight of feed sacks. But I never gave up. Every tree I planted, every fence I built, every animal I raised carried my sweat and my blood. This land wasn't just property. It was my soul materialized into $4 million of honest work. John was always different from David, from a young age. He would ask how much money we made, what the ranch was worth, when it would be his. While I woke up at dawn to milk the cows, he slept in late. While I negotiated with international buyers, he was out partying with the money I gave him. I paid for his college, his car, his wedding, his failed business ventures, always believing that one day he would appreciate my sacrifice. But the only thing he saw was an old woman standing between him and his inheritance. Mom, you're 67 years old, he told me, as he put the forged documents back in his briefcase. It's time you stop being stubborn and accept that you can't keep living alone in such a big place. With $15,000, you can rent an apartment in the city and live peacefully for the rest of your life. His tone was condescending, as if he were talking to a spoiled child. Besides, the buyer has already paid, and I've already invested the money. There's no turning back. I rose from my chair slowly, feeling every fiber of my being filled with a strength I hadn't felt in years. John thought he had defeated me, that he had taken everything I had fought for, but what he didn't know was that during that week, while he was celebrating his brilliant plan, I had been very busy with my lawyer Clara, preparing the biggest surprise of his life. The same determination that had led me to build a $4 million empire would now serve to show him that no one, not even my own son, was going to humiliate me like that. All right, John, I said with a calm that reassured him. I accept your proposal, but before I go, I want us to have dinner together one last time, as a farewell. He smiled, believing he had finally broken my will. Of course, Mom, I'll book a table at the fanciest restaurant in the city. You deserve it. What John didn't know was that this dinner would be the stage where his world would completely fall apart. The photograph of the ranch rested on the table, showing for decades of honest work. Soon, my son would discover that stealing from a woman who built an empire with her own hands was not as easy as he had thought. John, are you aware that you have just confessed to committing document fraud, financial abuse of a senior, and forgery of official documents? Because all of this is being recorded. She pointed to a small digital recorder she had discreetly placed on the table. John realized he had fallen into a perfectly orchestrated trap. Furthermore, Clara continued relentlessly, I want to inform you that the ranch could never have been legally sold because last week your mother transferred it to an irrevocable trust. She is the sole lifetime beneficiary, and any subsequent sale is automatically void. John looked at me with an expression of absolute shock. What does that mean? He asked in a hoarse voice. It means, my dear son, I said, finally finding my voice, that not only can you not sell my ranch, but you now have a very big problem. The supposed buyer, James Montgomery, who, according to Clara is you, has received a property that he legally cannot possess. Where are the $4 million you supposedly paid for it? The realization of his situation hit John like a tsunami. I invested that money, John stammered. It's in shares of a tech company. I can get it back. Clara shook her head. John, we investigated that supposed investment. The company, Innovate Americas, doesn't exist. It's another shell company you created to hide the money. Where is the $4 million? Really? John slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. At that moment, David approached our table. Sorry to interrupt, he said in a tense voice, but I think John should know that the bank has already frozen all his accounts for suspicious activity. John looked up at his younger brother with an expression of utter defeat. David, you're involved in this too. His voice sounded like that of a man who has just discovered his whole world has fallen apart. Involved in protecting our mother from your betrayal. Yes, John, I'm very involved, David replied with a firmness I had rarely seen in him. I was the one who told Mom about your plans. I was the one who convinced her to call Clara. And I was the one who contacted the banking authorities when I discovered the fraudulent transfers. John looked at his brother as if seeing him for the first time. Why? John asked, his voice breaking. Why did you betray me? David sat next to him and put a hand on his shoulder. John, I didn't betray you. You betrayed our family when you decided to steal everything Mom had worked for over 40 years. You betrayed your own mother when you treated her like she was an old and confused nuisance. Tears began to roll down David's cheeks. The waiter approached nervously to ask if everything was all right, clearly uncomfortable with the tension emanating from our table. Everything is perfectly fine, I said with a smile that probably looked ferocious. My family is just having a very necessary conversation about honesty and respect. The waiter quickly retreated, no doubt relieved not to be involved in our family drama. John looked up at me, his eyes full of tears. Mom, I'm sorry. I know I made mistakes, but I did it all thinking about the family's future. Clara and I exchanged a look. After everything that had happened, my older son was still trying to manipulate me with excuses and justifications. The transformation of my sweet boy into this selfish, cruel man was complete, and there was no going back. John's tears didn't move me as he had hoped. For 40 years, I had learned to distinguish between genuine repentance and desperate manipulation. John, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. If you had really thought about the family's future, you would have spoken to me before making decisions about my life and my property. His sobs intensified, but I was no longer the mother who melted at her children's tears. Mom, please, John begged, clinging to my hand. I know I messed up, but we can fix all of this. I can return the money. I can cancel the investments. I can make everything go back to normal. His desperation was palpable, but it also revealed that he still didn't understand the magnitude of what he had done. John, where exactly is the money you supposedly invested? Clara asked with a patience I knew was purely professional. John wiped his eyes with his napkin and tried to recompose his businesslike posture. The money is in an offshore investment account. It's a complex process, but I can access it in a few days. Clara pulled another folder from her briefcase. John, are you referring to the account in the Cayman Islands that you opened last week under the name JM Holdings? Because that account is also being investigated for money laundering. John's face fell completely. How is it possible you know all this? He muttered, more to himself than to us. John, when you decide to steal $4 million from your own mother, you automatically trigger multiple banking alert systems, Clara explained with a professional coolness that impressed me. International transfers of that magnitude without legitimate business justification are always investigated by financial authorities. David took John's hand with genuine sadness. Brother, how did we get to this point? When did you decide that money was more important than our mother? John looked up at David with a mix of resentment and desperation. You don't understand, David. You were always the favorite son, the one who never had to worry about money. I'm the oldest. I should have inherited the ranch automatically. The favorite son, I repeated in disbelief. John, I treated you both exactly the same. I gave you the same opportunities, the same education, the same love. John let out a bitter laugh that sent a shiver down my spine. The same love, Mom. David always got to do what he wanted. He went off to study art, married whoever he wanted, never had to prove anything. I had to study business because you said someone had to understand it to help you with the ranch. The revelation hit me like a lightning bolt. For all these years, John had harbored a resentment I had never perceived. John, I never forced you to study business. You told me you wanted to do it because you were interested in business. John shook his head violently. I wanted to study music, Mom. I wanted to be a composer. But you needed someone who understood numbers and contracts. So I sacrificed my dreams for the family. The silence that followed his confession was deafening. David looked at me in surprise, clearly unaware of this version of the story. Clara watched everything with professional interest, probably accustomed to family conflicts revealing deep wounds during these types of confrontations. John, I finally said, if you felt forced to study something you didn't want, why did you never tell me? What for? John responded bitterly. The ranch was always your number one priority. Your plants, your animals, your crops. We were secondary. David understood that and went to live his own life. I stayed waiting for the moment you would finally acknowledge my sacrifice. His words hurt me more than I wanted to admit because there was some truth to them. John, it's true. The ranch was very important to me, I admitted honestly. It was my way of securing a future for both of you, but that doesn't justify you stealing everything I worked for over 40 years. John covered his face with his hands. I didn't want to steal from you, Mom. I wanted you to finally see me as your partner, as your rightful heir. I wanted to prove that I could multiply the value of the ranch through smart investments. Clara intervened gently. John, do you understand? There are legal ways to express those aspirations. You could have proposed a business plan to your mother. You could have asked to be included as a partner in the ranch's operation. You could have suggested investing part of the profits in other projects. John looked up with an expression that mixed desperation and frustration. I tried, John said, his voice breaking. For years, I proposed ideas to expand the business, to modernize operations, to diversify investments, but Mom always told me the ranch was fine as it was, that it didn't need changes. I realized John was right about this. I had been very conservative with my decisions, perhaps too resistant to change. But that didn't give you the right to make unilateral decisions about my property, I said firmly. If you wanted changes, you should have insisted more. You should have found ways to convince me, not to deceive me. John nodded slowly, as if he were finally understanding the gravity of his actions. I know, Mom, I know, and I hate myself for it, but when I saw the investment opportunity in Innovate, I thought I could prove my worth without having to ask your permission. John, David intervened gently. Innovate doesn't exist. Clara already explained that. What did you really invest the money in? John was silent for several minutes, clearly debating internally whether to tell the truth or continue lying. Finally, he sighed deeply. I invested it in cryptocurrency, he admitted in a barely audible voice. I thought I could triple the money in a few months and give Mom back her ranch, plus a spectacular profit. The confession landed on the table like a bomb. Cryptocurrency, I repeated in disbelief. John, you gambled $4 million of my money on cryptocurrency without my knowledge. Clara leaned forward with professional interest. John, could you be more specific? What kind of cryptocurrencies? Through what platform? John looked like a man who had just admitted to his own financial suicide. I invested in several new cryptocurrencies that promised extraordinary returns, John mumbled. Lunacoin, Galaxy, Token, a few others whose names I can't remember. The investment advisor assured me they were unique opportunities. Clara and David exchanged a horrified look. John, David said, his voice trembling, those are classic crypto scams. How much money is left? John completely slumped in his chair. According to my last statement, there's about $300,000 left. The rest was lost when several of the coins collapsed last week. The silence that followed was absolute. 4 million reduced to 300,000 in a matter of days. The magnitude of the loss was so great that my brain refused to fully process it. $300,000, he repeated slowly. John, you lost $3,700,000 in 1 week. John nodded without looking up, like a child who has just broken the most valuable vase in the house. I thought it was a temporary market correction, the advisor told me. All investments have initial volatility. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, probably calculating the legal implications of this revelation. John, do you have the documents for these investments? Contracts, receipts, communications with this supposed advisor? Clara asked with an urgency she hadn't shown before. John rummaged through his briefcase and pulled out several wrinkled papers. Here are some documents, but most of the transactions were digital. Clara examined the papers quickly, her expression growing increasingly somber. John, these are not legitimate investment documents, Clara said after reviewing everything. These are forms from a cryptocurrency pyramid scheme. Not only did you lose your mother's money, but you were the victim of massive fraud. John looked up with a spark of hope. Does that mean I can get the money back? Clara shook her head sadly. It means the scammers have already disappeared with the money, and the chances of recovery are practically nil. The reality of the situation finally settled over all of us. John had not only betrayed my trust and stolen my property, but he had irreversibly lost a fortune that represented 4 decades of work. The poetic justice was brutal. The son, who wanted to prove his financial superiority, had fallen for the most basic scam in the digital world. The devastation on John's face was complete. He had not only lost his family's respect but had financially destroyed what he so desperately wanted to possess. "Mom," he murmured, his voice barely audible, "what am I going to do now? I have no way to pay you back. My house is my credit cards are maxed out, and now the authorities have frozen my accounts." For the first time that night, I saw genuine vulnerability instead of calculated manipulation. "John, that is no longer my responsibility," I told him with a firmness that surprised even myself. "You made these decisions without consulting me, assuming you had a right over my life and my property. Now you have to face the consequences of your actions." Clara nodded in agreement as she organized the documents she had just examined. "Margaret is right, John. You are a 42-year-old adult. The decisions you made were yours, and so are the consequences." David took his brother's hand with genuine compassion. "John, I'll help you in any way I can, but first, you need to understand that what you did was terribly wrong." John squeezed David's hand as if it were his last lifeline. "Are you going to report me to the police, Mom?" he asked, terror in his eyes. The question hit me hard because despite everything, he was still my son. Clara answered before I could. "John, technically, you've already been reported. The banks automatically reported the suspicious transactions to the financial authorities. Document fraud, forgery of signatures, and financial abuse of a senior are serious crimes that are prosecuted automatically." John turned as white as a sheet. "Does that mean I'm going to jail?" "It depends on many factors," Clara explained professionally. "Your cooperation with the investigation, your willingness to return what's left of the money, and your mother's decision on whether she wants to proceed with additional civil charges." All eyes turned to me. The most difficult decision of my life was in my hands. I could send my own son to prison, or find another way to seek justice. "John, I want you to listen to me very clearly," I said after several minutes of tense silence. "What you did not only stole money from me, but it destroyed the trust I had placed in you for 42 years. You treated me as if I were an old and confused woman who deserved neither respect nor consideration." John began to sob again, but this time it seemed genuine. "Mom, I am so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to impress you." "Impress me by robbing me?" I asked in disbelief. "Impress me by treating me like a nuisance to be removed." John shook his head desperately. "No, Mom. I wanted to impress you by multiplying the money, giving you back the ranch with improvements, proving that I could be the successful son you always wanted." His words revealed a deep distortion of reality that genuinely worried me. "John, I never wanted you to be different from who you were," I said sadly. "I just wanted you to be honest, hardworking, and to respect others. Financial success was never my priority for either of you." David nodded vigorously. "Mom always told us that the important thing was to be good people, not rich people." John looked at his brother as if he had just heard this for the first time. Clara cleared her throat gently to get our attention. "Margaret, we need to discuss the next legal steps. John will have to face the criminal charges regardless of what you decide, but you can influence the civil penalties." I took a moment to process all the information. My son had committed serious crimes, had lost a fortune, and now his future depended partly on my decisions. "Clara, what are my options?" I finally asked. "You can proceed with a full civil lawsuit, seeking recovery of all damages plus additional penalties, or you can negotiate a settlement that includes the return of the remaining $300,000 plus a payment plan for the rest in exchange for not proceeding with some of the civil charges." John looked at me with desperate pleading in his eyes. And if I choose the full lawsuit, I asked. John would lose everything he has, his house, his car, any remaining assets. Additionally, the penalties could include punitive damages that would keep him in debt for life. The severity of the options struck me. Part of me wanted John to pay completely for what he had done, but another part remembered the little boy he once was. "Mom, please," John begged, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I promise I will do everything I can to make it up to you. I will work day and night. I will sell everything I have. I will find ways to pay back every dollar I lost." His promises sounded sincere, but I had learned to distrust easy words. "John, how can I trust your promises after what you've done?" I asked him directly. "How do I know this isn't another manipulation to avoid the consequences of your actions?" John wiped his eyes and looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen in years. "Because I now understand that I lost the most important thing I had, your respect and your trust. Money can be recovered, but that maybe never can be." David intervened gently. "Mom, can I suggest something?" I nodded, valuing his perspective. "What if we give John a chance to prove he's serious, but with very strict conditions?" Clara raised her eyebrows with professional interest. "What kind of conditions do you have in mind, David?" "John immediately returns the $300,000 that are left, sells his house and his car to generate more restitution funds, and agrees to work on the ranch without a salary until he has compensated for a significant part of the damage," David proposed. "Furthermore, all of this would be legally supervised with monthly reports to Clara on his financial progress." John nodded desperately at the proposal. "That's interesting," Clara said, "but we would need to add clear consequences if John fails to comply with the terms of the agreement. And we would also need guarantees that he won't be able to access any of Margaret's assets again without legal supervision." John seemed willing to accept any condition that would save him from complete ruin. "And what about the family relationship?" I asked, getting to the heart of the matter. "How do we rebuild the trust that you destroyed, John?" This question was more important to me than any financial consideration. John took several minutes before answering, clearly thinking deeply about his response. "Mom, I know I have no right to ask you for another chance," John finally said. "But if you allow me to work on the ranch, not as your heir or your partner, but as your employee, maybe over the next few years, I can prove that I am capable of respecting your work and your authority." His humility seemed genuine, but I knew that words were easy when someone was desperate. "John, the work on the ranch is hard," I warned him. "It means waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, working under the sun, getting your hands dirty, doing tasks you consider beneath your college education. Are you really willing to do that?" John nodded vigorously. "Mom, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I want to earn back your respect, even if it takes the rest of my life." Clara took notes as we spoke. "If we decide to proceed with a supervised agreement, we'll need to establish very specific terms: restitution amount, payment schedule, working conditions, consequences for non-compliance, and a clearly defined probationary period." John immediately agreed to all the legal requirements Clara mentioned. "There's one more condition," I finally said, feeling it was time to set the most important boundary. "John, if you accept this agreement, you can never again question my decisions about the ranch or pressure me to make changes I don't want. My property is mine and my decisions are final." John nodded solemnly. "I understand completely, Mom. I will not cross those boundaries again." The restaurant had almost completely emptied while we were having this conversation that would change our lives forever. The waiter discreetly approached to ask if we needed anything else, clearly hoping we would finish soon. "Just a few more minutes." The waiter approached again, clearly needing to close the restaurant. "Excuse me, but we need to close in 15 minutes, he informed us politely. Clara began to pack her documents. "Perfect. I think we've covered everything necessary for tonight. We'll meet at my office tomorrow to sign the official agreement documents." John nodded nervously, probably processing everything he had agreed to. As we stood up from the table, David hugged John with tears in his eyes. "Brother, I'm proud of you for accepting this opportunity. I know it's going to be hard, but I think it's exactly what you need." John returned the hug with intensity. "David, thank you for not giving up on me, despite what I did. I need you to help me stay on the right path this year." "John," I finally said, "there's one more thing you need to understand. During these 12 months, you're not just going to work to compensate for the money you lost, you're going to work to rebuild the respect you destroyed, the trust you betrayed, and the family relationship you almost ruined forever. John looked at me with a humility I hadn't seen since he was a child. Mom, I know I don't deserve this chance, but I promise I will do everything possible to be worthy of it. Clara walked us to the restaurant door. Margaret, I'm impressed by your wisdom in handling this situation. You're giving John a chance to redeem himself, but with complete legal protections for yourself. I thanked Clara for all her professional help. I couldn't have handled this without your legal expertise. I'll see you tomorrow for the official documents. When we stepped out into the cool night air, I felt as though I had just emerged from an epic battle. John's betrayal had been devastating. But at least now there was a path forward. John, I said before we parted ways, remember, tomorrow at 5 o'clock sharp, you'll be working like any other employee on the ranch. Don't be late. John nodded solemnly. I won't fail you, Mom. This time, I won't fail you. David offered to drive me home, but I preferred to drive alone to process everything that had happened. On the way back to the ranch, I reflected on the most intense night of my life. My son had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible, but I had shown that a 67-year-old woman could defend herself and set firm boundaries. The future was uncertain, but at least now it was on my terms. When I arrived at the ranch and saw my lands bathed in the moonlight, I felt a deep satisfaction. This land was still mine. My 40 years of work were protected, and maybe, just maybe, I would have the chance to get my lost son back, but this time, it would be under my rules and on my terms. The woman who had built an empire with her own hands was not going to be defeated by anyone's betrayal, not even her own son's. 3 months later, I woke up as always at 4:30 in the morning. The alarm clock was no longer necessary. My body had developed an internal clock after 4 decades of early mornings on the ranch. As I dressed, I heard footsteps in the yard outside. John was already awake, preparing for another day of work that would start promptly at 5. The first few days had been brutal for him. His hands, accustomed to holding documents and calculators, were covered in blisters after the first week of physical labor. His back, which had never carried more than a briefcase, ached from lifting sacks of feed and heavy tools. But to my surprise, John never complained once. Every morning, he showed up on time, ready to learn and work. Good morning, Mom, John greeted me when I stepped out of the main house. His appearance had changed drastically in these 3 months. His skin was tanned by the sun, his hands calloused, his muscles developed from physical labor. But more important than his external transformation was the change in his attitude. There was no arrogance in his voice anymore, only genuine respect and a humility he was learning day by day. Good morning, John, I replied with the professional neutrality I had maintained these past months. It wasn't coldness, but the necessary distance between an employer and her employee. Today, we're going to check the north sector of the pecan orchard. The trees need pruning and fertilization. John nodded and went to get the necessary tools without me having to tell him. He had learned the routine quickly. As we walked toward the orchard, I watched how John interacted with the trees. At first, he treated them like objects to be manipulated to complete a task, but gradually, he had begun to understand that each tree was a living being that required specific care and attention. This tree looks sick, he commented, pointing to a pecan tree with yellowish leaves. His observation was correct. What do you think might be causing that? I asked, testing his learning. John sat up with interest. Does that mean we can recover more money? I nodded cautiously. Possibly, but it also means you will need to testify against them. John didn't hesitate for a second. I'll do whatever it takes to help recover the money I lost because of my poor judgment. His immediate willingness to cooperate showed me that he was truly committed to making things right. Clara will arrange the necessary meetings with the prosecutors. John nodded with determination. That night, after David left and John retired to his cabin, I sat on my porch to reflect on the last 3 months. John's transformation had been remarkable, but I knew that 3 months was just the beginning. Real changes, deep changes in a person's character take years to solidify. However, for the first time since that devastating night at the restaurant, I felt something akin to hope. John was proving he could be disciplined, humble, and hardworking. More importantly, He was proving he could respect my authority and follow instructions without questioning or manipulating. These were the basic foundations upon which we might one day rebuild a family relationship. 1 year later, a year after that dinner that changed our lives forever, I woke in the early morning with a different feeling in my chest. Today marked the exact end of John's probationary period, and for the first time in 12 months, I felt genuinely optimistic about our family's future. The familiar sound of footsteps in the yard confirmed that John was already awake, preparing for another day of work that had completely transformed his character. During these 12 months, John had met every single condition of the agreement without a single fault. He had worked from dawn till dusk, had learned every aspect of the ranch's operation, and had shown a dedication I never thought he possessed. More importantly, he had recovered a total of $800,000 through the sales of his properties and cooperation with the authorities to pursue the scammers. "Good morning, Mom," John greeted me as I left the house. His physical transformation was remarkable, tanned by the sun, muscular from the work with calloused hands that showed a year of honest labor. But his emotional transformation was even more impressive. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by a genuine humility and a deep respect for the work and for me. "Good morning, John," I replied, but this time my voice had a warmth that had been absent for months. "Today is a special day." John nodded with a nervous smile. "Yes, Mom, my year of probation is up." I could see the anxiety in his eyes, wondering what decision I had made about his future. "I want you to know that you have surpassed all my expectations," I told him sincerely. During the morning, we worked together in the fields as we had done hundreds of times over the past year, but this time I watched every gesture of John's with new eyes. The gentle way he treated the animals, the meticulous care with which he pruned the trees, the patience with which he explained farming techniques to new workers. This was the man I had hoped he would become for 42 years. At noon, Clara arrived at the ranch for our scheduled meeting. Throughout the year, she had monitored John's progress monthly, and her reports had been consistently positive. "Margaret, in all my years as a lawyer specializing in family cases, I have rarely seen a transformation as complete as John's," she told me as we reviewed the final documents. "John has met every term of the agreement," Clara continued. "He has returned $800,000 of the $4 million lost, has worked without a salary for 12 months, and has demonstrated a genuine change in his character and values." John sat with us, clearly nervous to hear my final decision about his future on the ranch and in our family. "John," I said, looking him directly in the eye, "a year ago, you betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. You stole my trust, forged my signature, and tried to take everything I had worked for over 4 decades. John looked down, clearly ashamed by the reminder of his past actions. "But during this year, you have shown that you are capable of changing. You have worked harder than any employee I've had in 40 years. You have learned to respect this land and to understand what it means to build something with your own hands. You have shown humility, dedication, and a genuine commitment to doing things right." The emotion in John's face was visible as he listened to my words. "Therefore," I continued, "I have decided to offer you a permanent position on the ranch, not as my automatic heir, but as my junior partner, with a fair salary and the opportunity to participate in operational decisions." John looked at me in disbelief, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Really, Mom? You trust me enough for that?" "John, complete trust will take years to rebuild," I explained honestly. "But you have shown that you deserve a chance to continue proving yourself. However, there are conditions." Clara pulled out a new contract we had prepared. "You will continue under legal supervision for the next 3 years, and any significant financial decision requires my explicit approval." John immediately accepted all the conditions without even reading them. "Mom, just the fact that you're letting me stay is more than I deserve." His tears of gratitude moved me deeply. "John, we all deserve second chances when we are willing to work for them." I extended my hand, and when he took it, I felt I was finally getting my son back. That afternoon, we called David to share the news. His joy was immediate and genuine. "John, I'm so proud of you. You've shown that you can change when you really commit to it." The 3 of us hugged for the first time in over a year, and for the first time since that terrible night, our family felt whole again. During dinner, John asked me a question I had been expecting. "Mom, will you ever be able to completely forgive me for what I did?" I reflected carefully before answering. John, forgiveness isn't a single event. It's a process. Every day you prove that you've changed. Every honest decision you make, every moment of respect you show me contributes to that forgiveness. I no longer feel the anger I felt a year ago. I continued. I no longer feel the betrayal like an open wound. What I feel now is hope. Hope that you have truly found your way. Hope that we can build a new and better relationship on the foundation of mutual respect. John nodded with tears in his eyes, clearly moved by my words. That night, as I prepared for bed, I reflected on the most challenging year of my life. My son had betrayed me in the most brutal way possible, but he had also given me the opportunity to demonstrate my own strength. I had set firm boundaries, demanded respect, and created the conditions for a true reconciliation based on actions, not empty words. The next day, John would officially begin as my junior partner on the ranch. He would have a salary, real responsibilities, and the chance to genuinely contribute to the success of the operation he had tried to steal a year earlier. The poetic justice was perfect. The son, who wanted to inherit the ranch without working for it, would now have to earn it day by day. With his honest effort, as I fell asleep, I listened to the familiar sounds of the ranch that had been my home for 4 decades, the crickets chirping, the wind in the trees, the distant murmur of the cattle. But there was a new sound that filled me with peace. John's footsteps in his cabin, preparing for another day of honest work. The woman who had built an empire with her own hands had shown that no one, not even her own son, could defeat her when she was determined to defend what she had built. But more importantly, she had shown that a mother's love, combined with firm limits and clear consequences, could create the conditions for genuine redemption. John had lost $4 million of my money, but he had found something much more valuable. He had found his soul, his purpose, and his way back home, and I had recovered not only my assets, but the hope that my family could heal and grow stronger than before. Sometimes, the most painful betrayals become the most powerful opportunities for growth, forgiveness, and genuine transformation. The ranch that had been the scene of the greatest betrayal of my life would now be the witness to the most beautiful redemption I could imagine. And for the first time in a year, I fell asleep with a smile on my face, knowing the future was full of new and hopeful possibilities.